Well, Saturday was about as ugly as it could get for the St. Louis Cardinals. Things have truly gone off the rails against the Rockies of all teams. We'll talk about it coming up on B-Schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer here with you. Late Saturday evening, June 8th, 2024. Well, that wasn't good. No, it was not. Not good, Cardinals. Bad. Very, very bad. 6-5, Rockies beat the Cardinals on Saturday. Cardinals blow a late lead, which is uncharacteristic of what we've seen from this Cardinals bullpen recently, especially the guy who took the loss, Andrew Kittredge. That's not something we're used to seeing from him. But the Cardinals, after getting down early in this game, thanks to some miscues, again, we got to talk about the lack of crisp fundamental play because it reared its head again today for the Cardinals. It started early. Cardinals got down, but they end up benefiting from the Rockies doing some of the same stuff. Cardinals scored 3 runs on what ostensibly should have been a double play ball. And I guess I understand why Alauris Montero was moved to first base from the third base side. Guy came over to the Rockies in that Arenado trade with the Cardinals. And his throw, well, I don't know what that was. But you know what? The Cardinals had the same thing from the same spot on the field with Nolan Gorman doing it. It just didn't cost the Cardinals 3 runs on the same very throw as it did the Rockies. So the Cardinals were able to come up with the lead, but then they give it right back with Kittredge. And despite Matt Carpenter hitting a blast to freeze his lawn, that was not enough as the Cardinals lose 6-5. The best they can do is split the series with the Rockies in 4. And Sunday coming up, starting pitcher will be, well, Oli Marmol still wouldn't say postgame, despite the fact that this morning he said that he would tell us after the game who his starter would be. The bizarre treatment of the number 5 spot in the Cardinal rotation continues. No, it's not that Andre Pallante was used. They just don't want to say out loud that it's him. The only reason I could think of that is they're going to send him down. Like, what are they? I don't know. I am just at a loss anymore with this team right now. And I don't know really what to say. But it's a podcast, and so I got to figure out what to say pretty quickly. But we're honestly going to take our cues tonight from Oli Marmol because his postgame was something. And full disclosure, I was not in the room for this postgame press conference. I drove down to Busch Stadium this morning, did the pregame media availability in Oli Marmol's office with the other writers, hung out on the field in the dugout for a little while, and then I actually went home. Didn't stay for the game. Had plans with the family. We're at the parish picnic out at All Saints where I went to school as a kid. And that's what we did this afternoon. But I'm up to date on everything that happened now. And we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna listen to some Oli Marmol comments from after the game because, like I said, this was we're gonna talk about the game through the lens of his postgame, which is not something we normally do, but I think is worth exploring today because he was feisty, man. He was feisty after the game, and I think in several ways he misstepped on this one. So we're going to talk about it. We'll talk about how the team, like, it's a little bit weird for me because I don't want to make this just about, hey, Oli Marmol's postgame was a nightmare. It was, but I don't want to make it just about that. The game itself was a nightmare. The Cardinals lose again to the Rockies, one of the worst teams in the league. That's got to be the headliner here, but I think we're going to get enough of our conversation about the game through some of the questions that were asked and the answers to them, because I'll be honest with you, although there were some exceptions taken to the questions by the manager, I thought the questions were pretty spot on as to how the Cardinals lost this game, and they got to the heart of the issue in many ways. And the fact that there was so much pushback on the way these questions were asked maybe tells you something about how on edge right now this Cardinals team is. To be losing to the Rockies, I don't think anybody feels good about. And that may explain some of what we heard after the game today. But we're going to just get right into it. So if you enjoy Cardinals content, I bring it to you daily all season long. Hit that subscribe button to follow along on this channel and check out my future videos. You can also follow B-Schaeff Daily on Spotify. It's the name of the podcast. But I'm just going to get right into it. We're just going to play some audio courtesy of Valley Sports Midwest and talk about the questions, because it'll allow us an opportunity to talk about these moments in the game that were critical, and then maybe some of the answers and as to why there was so much pushback on some of these questions. So without further ado, courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest, Cardinals manager Oli Marmol.
Today, I still feel like we should have had better at-bats, decent mix of that four-seam and the sinker, somewhat unpredictable in hitters counts, mixing in the slider. So mixed it enough, but I still feel like we should have thrown a couple better at-bats on him tonight.
So Oli Marmol talking there, I don't know what the question was. Again, I was not there. I'm not going to ever pretend to have done something that I didn't do. You're always going to know, so there's transparency about my perception of a given game or a given moment. If I'm in there, I'll tell you. If I ask the question, I'll tell you. You'll know. This one, I'm flying from afar, but I'm comfortable doing it because I think there's some things we got to talk about. So I don't know what the question was there, but Oli Marmol basically off the top of what was posted, at least by Bally Sports, talking about wishing they had taken some better at-bats in this game. Another game where RISP is a problem. Cardinals go 1 for 8 with runners in scoring position. On the day, they have 5 hits and a walk. I imagine the question might have pertained to what was it that Feltner was doing to you guys that was giving you fits, because you struck out 7 times in 5 1/3 innings against a starting pitcher in Ryan Feltner that his ERA was over 6 coming into the game. It was 6.22 for the season. No offense to the guy, but you're talking about one of the worst starters statistically in MLB this year. And the Cardinals struck out 7 times in 5 1/3. And they scored 4 runs against him. He was charged with 4 runs. They were all unearned because of the throw by Alaris Montero on what should have been, I don't know how you would have maybe done the double play, but a 3-6-3 or a 3-6-1 with the pitcher covering, double play. At a minimum, you get the out at second base. Instead, he sailed the throw. It went all the way into the left field corner and 3 runs scored. Cardinals tied the game right then and there. Without that, this looks a hell of a lot worse. But the Rockies tried to give you the game, and the Cardinals said, no, thank you. No, thank you. We're good. No, we're good. No, we appreciate the gesture, but we're good. No, you have it. You take it. That's kind of what happened tonight, or this afternoon at Busch Stadium. But the at-bats, all he mentions, he's right. Look, there's always this threshold of, like, how much should he talk about the negative of what's going on in terms of, all right, plate approach, at-bats, what's going on with your team. I like it when a manager says, yeah, we got to take some better at-bats, because it's honest. Because you don't come away from a start 5 1/3, 7 strikeouts, no earned runs. You only get your runs because of an error. You don't come away with that game going, yeah, we did our job offensively. We grinded up there. Nobody wants to hear that. And so, to Oli's credit, we'll go back and forth, and I'll tell you where I agreed with him, and I'll tell you where I disagree with him. But in that spot, to his credit, he said, we should have taken some better at-bats. We need to be better. And that's true. But this is where the questions, you'll start to hear them, and we'll start to be able to dive in onto the other aspects of this game, and it's going to center around a few things. Fundamental baseball is one of them.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned recently about Kittredge finding some rest for him. Do you worry about his appearances piling up? Is it 30 already?
Just because he gave it up today? Just because he gave it up today?
No. We asked about this the other day.
Yeah, no, we had a good conversation leading into that game. He felt great. Velo was there. He was up to 94. He felt great coming out of that game. He guy got a pitch underneath the zone and hit it a long ways.
And so, in fairness to this answer, it is true that the pitch Tovar hit off of Kittredge, which was his second home run of the game by that point, I believe, it was not a terrible pitch. It was not a strike. It was in off the plate, and Tovar figured out what to do with it, and it put the Rockies ahead. Those are going to happen from time to time, and in this spot, it did. Now, granted, it's not the only thing that happened in that inning against Kittredge, because he comes in and the game was tied. It was 4-3 Cardinals when he came in. Double to Blackman. He steals third because it's kind of free at this point. We'll talk about Herrera was asked about. We'll talk about the way that question was received. But then a base hit scores Charlie Blackmon for third. So, it's not just the Tovar home run. By the way, Brenton Doyle then stole second base right after Charlie Blackmon scored on his single. So it's not just the Tovar home run, but I will say it was not, I think it's Andrew Kittredge. He's been really, really good for the Cardinals this year, and he gave it up today. Those are things that are going to happen because I have continued to harp on all year long, relievers, nobody is going to end the season with a 0.00 ERA all year. Nobody. So you understand, guy gives up a home run, guy has a bad day. It is what it is. If you stack too many of them in a row, you start to worry about a guy. And, John Denton is asking about Kittredge in general. He's had a high workload, a lot of appearances already. Is there concern there? Oli said, well, why? Because he gave it up today? Well, no, because it's a question that's pretty fair, right? It's fair to ask about the guy who blows the game. In this case, though, I don't think there's a whole lot else to it because it is Andrew Kittredge, and sometimes relievers are going to give up runs, right? There's sometimes not. It's no deeper than that. It's not that deep, right? And in this case, I think it's just not that deep. If he has a few more like this, then we can start to say, yeah, we don't trust Kittredge anymore. I'm not at that point. So you may be, let me know. And comments are going to be fired off on this one. Let me know at any point in this video if you got comments. You can comment multiple times. If you agree with something I said, disagree with something I said, whatever. Anything's fair game. I'll try to put my big boy pants on in replying to some of these. If I don't reply to you, just understand I read it and I just couldn't stomach. My mental health is at stake, right? So, but no, let those comments be because I understand that fans want to sound off about this, and you guys are right to want to sound off about this. This was a bad loss. Again, there's a lot of things that happened here. Fundamentals are one of them, and we'll get into it. But I just want to continue to harp on. You had 5 hits, 1 walk, and you struck out 12 times. And the guy who struck you out 7 times in 5 1/3 was Ryan Feltner, who his parents love him, and he's probably a really nice guy. Not a good big league starter this year. His ERA went from 6.22 to 5.74 in the game today. So that's just really not good. It is not good. Goldschmidt, he had a hit in an RBI. Carpenter had the home run. Carlson went 1 for 3, scored a run. Acceptable day offensively. We'll talk about the misplay defensively. You hate to see that in center in his first game after the game that we wanted to be the breakout game. Arenado had a knock with an RBI, and Donovan had a base hit. Have I covered everybody? I think I did. 5 hits from this lineup today against the Rockies. They came in with an ERA well above 5 as a team, and the starter was above 6. So that's really, of all the things I think to be irritated about with this loss, let me know how you feel about this, Cardinals fans, but I'm thinking it's the offense. I mean, that was just a bad showing. You don't score hardly any runs other than Carpenter's homer that weren't given to you on a silver platter because of a bad throw. So that's kind of my thought on that, but let's continue. The Kittredge thing was the first, question that we touch on here, but it gets a lot more nitty-gritty after this.
Just your thoughts on the crispness of some of the play, not just the errors, but we talked earlier about the stolen bases that you allowed today. There was an error related to a stolen base, a walk, just the attention to detail. What's your feeling?
Okay, so the question there was Derek Gould's, and you heard at the end he mentions attention to detail, and everything about the question I thought was nails, but then Oli is going to hear that phrase, attention to detail, and that's the part he's going to have a problem with. Derek was asking about basically the fundamentals, and the Cardinals have been bad at them, right? But then he hears attention to detail, and here's his response. I think he kind of hyperfixated on this aspect of it.
The attention to detail or just the errors? Those are 2 different things.
Okay. We'll then separate them. You talked about the errors that you obviously, that's uncharacteristic. You want to improve. Part of the errors is also, is it not attention to detail?
We need to improve it. Yeah, defense has not been good. Gibby did a really nice job of pitching through some noise today, that's for sure. I mean, he was phenomenal of making the next pitch and just staying in the moment, making the next pitch. Some guys would have caved there, and it would have been a much different game, or we would have been out of it much earlier. But the Gorman play obviously sticks out. The DC one, there's several that stick out there. The throwdown the walk that leads to that run as well. So, yeah, it's not good. The attention to detail has been super high in that clubhouse and the preparation leading into it. I feel good about what our guys are doing leading into the game. And the quality of that's no different than when we were praising the defense early on this year. We're just in a little bit of a rut where there are a lot of mistakes being made on the field.
So Derek there's gonna be a back and forth that continues between Derek Gould of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and Cardinals manager Oli Marmol. But I don't want to get too far into it before we address some of what was said there. Basically, lack of crisp play. And obviously, Oli pushes back on the use of the phrase attention to detail. And I get that because there's a read on that phrasing that implies a lack of preparation. And Oli says all that. He says that in the quote. There may be more that I play that he says. I forget exactly when he specified which aspects of it. But we get it. They're putting in the work. And I don't really think anyone, and Derek is included in this, I don't think anyone's attempting to question the behind-the-scenes work and the prep being put in. But the work is implied to me at the big league level, right? The work is a prerequisite. Fans want the results to match up with the work, and to me, they're not wrong to ask for that, right? That's how you win ball games. So it is a performance business rather than a put-in-the-work business. So while I understand Ollie's perspective here, I think it's a hard place for him to stand on business, right? Because the results are at question right now. You mentioned a number of the plays. We'll start with Herrera, and there will be a question about Herrera that we'll double back to discussing him. And I don't want to single him out too much and harp on him too much, but it's the big leagues. So there's a throw in the first inning where the batter walked, but the runner from first was trying to steal second. So when the batter walks, you just don't throw the ball, and it's first and second. He throws the ball, and it's not remotely close to being fielded by the infielder covering second, and it allows the runner to advance to third. So, that's brutal. The throw itself is one thing, and we'll talk about Oli Marmol later saying that Herrera is deficient in throwing the ball, which is, for basically him saying, I'm not going to answer these kind of questions anymore. He sure gave a quote of, our catcher is deficient in throwing the ball. That's tough, but it's not false. But in the first inning, that's a walk, and you throw down anyway. I hate to say it, but that is attention to detail. It is. Oli can push back, but it is. It's not necessarily just errors, as you'll hear Derek ask about here momentarily. What is the phrase is the question that I'm going to play here in a moment that Derek follows up with, because if it's not attention to detail, what do we call it? When the batter walks, but your catcher throws the ball down to second base. Again, I'm not trying to rip Herrera, but I do think it's a fair line of questioning. And Gorman makes the error kind of similar to the one that Montero made. Just 3 runs didn't score because of it at the moment. And again, the Rockies did the exact same thing, so it is what it is. But that's another error on Gorman. And I will say, credit to Oli on while we're talking about defense and the little things. He pulled the right lever in the first inning when, after the Rockies had already scored the runner that got to third because of Herrera's throw, they had the infield in, which I've harped on saying I don't like the infield in. I think it invites crooked numbers. But they got the ground ball right to Gorman. He did bounce the throw to Herrera, but Ivan fielded it cleanly and made the tag, and the infield was creeped in, and it actually did help secure that out. Like I said, I normally think big innings are to follow when you do that, but this time it worked out. So, hey, that's the right lever. I'm more than willing to give credit for that. But as I talk about it, the other defensive elements were discussed. Gorman's error. Dylan Carlson just didn't catch a ball in the 6th because he took a bad route. It's an easy play. It's a routine play if he doesn't step in with his first step on a ball that's hit right to him, but deeper than he's currently standing. And I've seen that from him a lot in center field this year. And I was hoping that get a little momentum behind you, get a little wind beneath your sails, and you just play with more confidence. But defensively, in center in particular, those balls hit right at him have been tough. And the judgment on those it's not been strong. So, but again, I understand, and that's just a few of the examples of some of the things that happened in this game. Defensively, there's some untimely walks that I think count as part of the fundamentals. Again, maybe fundamentals is just a better phrase than attention to detail. But if we're getting hyper fixated on the semantics. It does, because I do think it kind of feels like semantics to say, well, you said attention to detail, and we're really paying attention to detail. Ask our coaches about all the detail they're putting in the work. Totally get that. But like, okay, even if the phrasing isn't proper, the reality is, I think the way the reporter asks it, it's almost out of courtesy, because you're not very likely to get a very good answer if you say to the manager, hey, you guys are kicking the ball all over the damn place. Why are you playing so bad defensively? You got to have a little tact. And so, you throw in the phrase attention to detail, and that's what gets harped on. I think that's missing the plot a little bit. Like, all he knows is defense is playing poorly. So nitpicking the phrasing of the question, while I understand why he feels compelled to do it, isn't going to win you any favor, because it ultimately serves to distract from a pretty legitimate premise, right? To just take ownership of there are issues defensively, we'll work to fix it. And ultimately, he did say that. You heard the quote there, and he'll say more about it as we play more about it. But I just thought the extra drama was probably not helpful there, and it's just the prickliness that it sort of builds in this presser as you listen to it. We'll continue here.
What's the phrase to use? Because they're not all errors.
They're errors and non-plays.
They're non-plays.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm asking about.
Yeah. Attention to detail to me is more in preparation. How guys are approaching their day. Is there a lack of focus or a lack of attention to things that they need to be working on? That stuff's you can get with Willie and Stubby and understand how much attention to detail there is at the moment. So that's where I would push back a little bit on that part.
So I think it's just a little bit of a difference of interpretation. And look, when the manager feels like this is a shot at my coaching staff, at the work being put in behind the scenes, which they take very seriously. And I know some fans go, I don't care about the work, I just want the results. And I totally get it. But the man is a man, he's human, and when he feels his credibility and the work his team is putting in, when he gets to see it behind the scenes, is being attacked, which I don't think it was, but he felt that it was. That is, I think, where some of that comes from. Like I said, I think to an outsider, it looks like semantics. And because the premise is correct, and the premise is that they're playing bad defensively and they're not playing good fundamental baseball, to nitpick the way it was asked, although I can totally understand why he did, that's where it ends up kind of getting lost a little bit. But we'll continue courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest because the back and forth exchange continued.
I just wanted to include, not just fixate on the errors, but also some of the other plays that are out there that just aren't up to like your usual expectations.
Sure. Yeah.
Go ahead.
One of the challenges from a manager's spot, balancing defensive replacement that we've seen with Siani, but also taking out arguably one of your best players in the lineup.
That one.
Okay, so before we let Ollie answer this one, the question that Katie Wu asked is basically, and I said we're going to talk through the game and the key moments of the game through the questions, because I thought the reporters that were there actually nailed it. The questions I thought were pertinent. She's asking about a moment in the game where Burleson is subbed out defensively for Michael Siani after the Cardinals take the lead because of the throwing error by Montero. The Cardinals end up scoring 4 runs in that inning. I think it was Arenado that had the RBI base hit later on in the inning to actually go ahead. It was 3-3. They make it 4-3 with the Arenado hit. And now you go into, hey, it's late innings. We're going to go to our top relievers that are available. And it was Kittredge's lane. And so he's coming in for the 7th. And also, as we do that, we're going to bring in Michael Siani for Alec Burleson. Burleson was in the 2-hole today. He would have been due up, or was due up, rather, 5th in the 7th inning. So it's not like he had just batted. He batted in the 6th, but he batted earlier in the 6th. It was a long inning for the Cardinals, and so they brought a bunch of guys to the plate. So he was 5th due up, which means he's going to bat for sure once. That spot is going to come up, which does make it different than what we saw yesterday in the game on Friday when they had Siani pinch run for Gorman. It worked splendidly, and then you figure, well, Gorman's spot isn't going to come up again unless this game goes to extra innings. This was different because he had 3 innings to go. But all he's going to explain is the answer, and then I'll dig in a little bit more because I don't want people to forget the question because I've talked for so long. So here's back to Oli Marmol.
It's not as difficult. You're looking at he's up 5th the next inning. You're in the 7th. He's not guaranteed to hit in the 7th. You're flipping 3 innings of defense with a 1-run lead for 1 at bat, which you know is going to be a left on left with Beeks. So, I mean, you could think that one through however you want, up and down, but you're trading 1 left on left at bat for 3 innings of defense with the lead. If you look at our bullpen, we're pretty good at not giving up a run. So you're going to play your best defense for the last 3 innings of the game for 1 at bat of Burley.
And that's consistent with what the Cardinals have done with a lead. It's just a little different this time because it's so early. It's only the 7th inning. And because the Cardinals gave up that lead right away, you're spending the rest of that game going, yeah, would sure like to have Burles at bat. But to Oli's point, I do think he explained this one fairly well. It would have been an at-bat against Jalen Beeks anyway when Burleson's spot did come back up. And Burley's got a 560 OPS or whatever it is against lefties this year. And that was maybe not worth the trade-off of just making sure you have your best defense. It looks worse because they lost the game. I don't think this move was necessarily that bad. I'm okay with it. I'm okay if you want to harp on it, though, Cardinals fans. I just can, again, this one I'm agnostic on. I don't have a huge take, but Oli presents it pretty cut and dry. And if the Cardinals win, we're just talking about, yep, that's another savvy little move. But because Andrew Kittredge blows the game, which is something that doesn't typically happen, and as Oli said, normally our bullpen's not going to allow a run when you get into like the triumvirate territory as they were. I don't know that JoJo Helsley were both going to be coming out next, but maybe. So I can definitely understand the move. I think it's okay. There was a spot in there though where he told Katie, he said you can think about it up. And then he kind of paused. I thought he was going to say up in the press box, which would have been, a little prickly. If you say, yeah, you can think about it up in the press box however you want. But then he said up and down. So I don't know. I might be just reading too much into that one. But Oli Marmol's press conference goes on. Like I said, that one, I don't really have a huge issue with it. I understand the question, though. Again, it's a relevant question. It's pertinent to what happened. And ultimately, Fermin ended up batting in the spot, so Siani didn't even bat. Dylan went from center to right when Siani came in, back to center, because the Cardinals had to go into scramble mode to try to win the game, and Fermin was a better option than Siani batting against Jalen Beeks. So I understand that for sure. But, again, the point he made was, look, we don't normally give up leads, and it happened. And it sometimes does happen, and that's where the decision can look a little funky, because Burley is one of your more capable bats lately, but they were playing the percentages, and I don't necessarily even hate that one. I just, it's one of the things that I think was fair to ask about, and he gave an explanation for. We'll continue with the audio courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest.
Yeah.
Is there anything you specifically noticing from about an opponent's ability to go based on him?
We've talked about this, man. I'm not going to harp on the kid. He's deficient in being able to throw, okay? He's working on it. This is a kid that's taken a lot of pride in the process of working on it. It's not something that's coming easy to him, but you can ask it every day if you like. You're going to get the same answer.
All right, so that was a prickly spot, right? It's not like Oli yelled at him, but he said, we've talked about it, man. And there was an eye roll. I mean, he was testy about getting that question and gave the line deficient in being able to throw. Says he's taking pride in the process of trying to improve it, which I absolutely can respect. Don't twist it as though I don't respect the process, but I am going to kind of lean back again on that the results are what counts. And so you can give credit for working on it, but that's still the job. If he's going to be a viable catcher in the big leagues, that is going to be part of it. So I thought it was kind of a bad look for Oli to respond to Ethan's question this way. This was Ethan Hannaford, who works for KMOX, which is relevant to his affiliation is relevant to this because the question is relevant. It's not even like a gotcha question. It's just continuing to be a relevant line of thought as Herrera continues to struggle and teams around the league are able to take advantage of his throwing arm, which is not particularly strong. And we all love Ivan, but it has been rough. I mean, if you look at stolen base numbers, there's only one catcher in baseball right now with a lower caught stealing percentage that has any real significant opportunities to his credit. Anybody with at least 12 opportunities to throw out a base runner there's only one, Rene Pinto, who's with the Rays. He's 1 for 19. And Ivan is, I think he's 3 for 42 or something at this point. I don't think ESPN is updated yet, but he's like 070 or so. You know, if that was a batting average, we'd be like, what is going on here? So it's just been one where I think more and more these days, like within the last week and a half or so, teams are going, like scouting reporters, hey, challenge this guy early and challenge him often because he's not demonstrated the ability to do it. And that puts pitchers in a bind. It's a thing, like it's a full-fledged thing, and Ollie understands it. Here's why Ollie pushes back on it, and I'm not defending it because I don't think it was right. But his point was that this was a topic that was discussed at length in a pregame session with beat writers earlier in the week. But the thing that I know that Ollie knows but might not have realized or just mentally glossed over in the heat of the moment with the live cameras on, Ethan Hannaford is a radio reporter. He was not in the room with the writers when that was discussed. It's different times for different styles of media. And that was not something that he was privy to. So that conversation, it happened. All the people who knew about it. But how could he have known about it? So that's number one. But the next level to this is to think that just because a topic got discussed in a pregame means it's off limits as a topic to still be asked about again when it keeps being relevant and Herrera keeps being put behind the plate. He's in the lineup and, you know, continuing to not throw guys out, and it's kind of a deficient area for the team. Okay, then that's fair game. I'm a fan of Ollie. I keep saying that because I want to make sure people know where this critique is coming from. I'm not just trying to railroad this guy. But to me, that's not how it works in the big leagues. I understand if he doesn't have a different answer for it the next day, but when it's going to be kind of multiple stolen bases a day and an error, like he gave up 2 stolen bases today. The third one was just an error on Herrera because it's not a stolen base when the guy walks and you still throw it and he takes third on the wild throw. So really it was 3. So when it's 2-3 times a game that it's just free bases that are being handed out, it's a tough spot. And I get it. He's working on it. He's probably their best option right now unless you DH him and play Pages back there. But when this is happening daily, that's a fair and above board question that I think got railroaded a bit by Ollie. And honestly, I imagine Ollie may even give Ethan a heads up on that one at some point to say, hey, man, that was not right. You know, I shouldn't have handled it that way because I don't think he should have. Now, I also am predicting Pedro Pages is going to be behind the plate on Sunday, so this doesn't have to be a topic on Sunday. And I bet you Herrera is going to be DHing. I don't remember offhand who's pitching for the Rockies, and I couldn't tell you who's pitching for the Cardinals because they didn't tell us. And genuinely on that front, and it'll be mentioned because we'll hear the question that gets asked when Ollie says, no, don't have a starter for you. It could be the Cardinals are using an opener tomorrow. I don't know. We'll see. It's not something we've really seen from them. But if you see like a Kyle Leahy throw an inning and then Palante go bulk, maybe to me, that's the only explanation for why you wouldn't be naming one. I don't think they're swooping somebody in from off the roster for tomorrow morning. I just don't see it unless there's an injury I'm not privy to or aware of yet. That's just my read on the situation. It's weird to say, yeah, I'll have a starter after the game and then just consistently to not name the starter. It's such a small thing, but I think it's indicative of the Cardinals not really having a great direction on certain things right now. You can say it's strategy. I'm going to mildly criticize it and say, I don't know, just name your starter. I don't know what's so difficult about it. I get it when there's games to be played because maybe something crazy happens and you need Palante in bulk relief. And then it's a different story the next day of what has to happen. All right, fair. Palante didn't pitch today. So I guess that's the only reason I would say maybe it is a situation where they're going to have an opener on Sunday. It really doesn't matter. But anyway, that's what it is. That's the story. So I've said everything I wanted to say about Ivan Herrera. Like I said, I'm not trying to overly harp on it, and obviously neither was Oli Marmol, but I think it's a fair question. If it's asked every single day, all right, just give it a non-answer every single day, but it is relevant because they keep putting him back there, and it's not up to par. So that's just my 2 cents on that. Here's more from Oli Marmol.
How do you look at the bottom of the 6th? Chances to score runs, but based on errors committed by them.
Yeah, they tried handing us the game, and they almost did. Those a couple ground balls that led to, runs on our end. But Nolan takes a good at bat there to drive in the extra run. But overall, it was more capitalizing on their mistakes. Yeah.
How much do you think of, as your offense kind of fits and starts and gets going, it's the middle of the order that needs to catch and kind of drive? Is that sort of what you're seeing with the offense?
And this is where things do get dicey. It's all coming up from here. But that question about the Rockies tried to give you the game, and for Oli to say, yeah, they tried to give us the game, and we said, no, thank you, was just, again, blunt in that regard, because there's frustration. It's just oozing out. Frustration that you got 3 runs on an error on one play that should have been arguably a double play ball to end the inning against the worst team in, well, the White Sox still exist. One of the worst teams in baseball, and you lose the game. So I don't think normally you'd hear a manager be so blunt as to basically say, yeah, they tried to give us the game, but, that's kind of where it was today. So this was the question, though, that pushed the stone down the hill a little bit further, and it started rolling, and you couldn't stop it. And as I paused this video, Oli kind of has a grin, and he's taking some exception, but it's a fair question. Derek is asking about, hey, the middle of the order, isn't that what kind of has to make this thing go? And look, this was a day where Goldie had an RBI hit, scored a run. Arenado had an RBI hit, but he struck out a couple of times, Goldie with a K, and Gorman was 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. So that was, that's 3, 4, 5 in your order. Top of your order was Burleson. He was 0 for. Wynn was 0 for. So some of the bigger names in the bigger spots of your lineup didn't perform, but nobody did, right? It was 5 hits, 1 walk. Only Carpenter, honestly, he was on base twice, and he's the only guy who can claim that. Had a homer, had a walk, and everybody else was just one singular hit. So the question about, hey, middle of the order coming up with these spots, you were 1 for 8 with RISP, I think it's a reasonable question, but the response is where things get a little dicey.
Yeah. Isn't that everybody's offense in the middle?
It is, yeah.
All right.
And when you start having the manager ask you questions back as the reporter, that's when you know things aren't going well. That's when you know something's going on, right? And it's not that, I think Derek would dispute, because Derek handles himself in this exchange. He would dispute that it didn't go well, because in his mind, hey, it's question and answer back and forth. He's got no problem with it. Doesn't care that it's on TV. He's going to stand his ground on the questions and be able to answer to any dispute that may come about his questions. But Oli is clearly prickly at this point and says, isn't that what everybody's trying to do? Middle of the order, driving the offense? Yeah, okay. And then he looks around, but Derek's still ready to continue the discussion.
But that's, yeah.
Isn't that where production's made?
It is.
For the most part?
It's usually where contenders are created, yeah.
Okay.
That's usually where contenders are made offensively. I don't know if Oli got an extra gear from that. The indication, the implication being, well, that is what contenders do, is their middle order drives it. And it's kind of open-ended, right? It's not to say that the Cardinals aren't contenders, but, contenders, they do. They have guys thumping in the middle of their order, and we know what it's been for Goldie and Arenado this year. And they both had an RBI today, but and I guess Goldie got an RBI on the one that I keep saying should have been a double play. So maybe the implication there is that it wouldn't have been a double play, because he's credited with at least having the RBI, and he would have been safe at first. I'm not 100% sure on that, on the ruling on that one, but I think that's what that has to be, because that's the only time that Goldie could have conceivably driven in a run. So anyway, that's that. We shall continue with this exchange, courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest.
Yeah.
You started for tomorrow.
Okay, that's Jeff Jones asking for the starter, right? The answer is going to be no, but this is where Oli goes back to Derek and where things go off the rails.
I do not. And I'm not trying to push back. It's just yesterday things go well. We find ways to make some moves at work, and you're on the third row, no questions. Today, a couple things don't go well. You're in the first row like a kid in a candy shop. So,
okay. Yeah. That was the money quote, I think, for people who were tuned into the postgame and heard that, and they were like, wait, what? And I think at this point, tensions were high, and I think Oli made it kind of personal in a way that, it's just not a good look. It's not a good look. I don't want to pontificate on this for hours and hours, but other than to say it's just not a good look. And I'll play the rest of the exchange because Derek has no issue having this exchange. But his point, as you're going to hear him say, is that, well, the game last night, he was not scheduled through the newspaper to write. He was there as a way to assist his colleagues at the paper in any way that they needed, with gathering quotes, whatever, in the clubhouse, being boots on the ground in case anything big happened. I don't work at the Post-Dispatch, so I can't speak to what exactly his role would have been, but that is relatively standard for those guys because they have a large workforce. They've got a lot of people that work at the newspaper. So if Derek's going to say, I wasn't scheduled to write, maybe that would be a reason that it's, but the implication was, well, we won last night and did a lot of good things. You didn't ask any questions. Now tonight you're eager to ask a bunch of questions about how bad our game went, which is not, I mean, again, that feels personal in a way that I know that Derek is going to take exception with, which he did. You'll hear it.
Well, I wasn't writing yesterday.
I'm just saying.
No, I wasn't writing. No, you asked, so I'll answer here on my telephone.
No, we don't have to. I'm just saying.
I wasn't writing yesterday.
So I'm not trying to push back, but at the same time, it's just.
You're welcome to push back. That's
okay.
Question and answers are for.
Any other questions?
So that's there. There was another question after that, but we're gonna kind of stop it there because it was a question that Oli answered and said, he was asked about the hits that were almost homers but weren't. Is that frustrating? And he gave a pretty canned answer to that. But, that it just felt like it went off the rails more than a little bit. And I don't know, man. That was a brutal loss, and I have no other way to describe it other than you're hearing it in the post-game conversations there, the tension. And you're supposed to beat the Rockies, man. But when they give you 3 runs for free, that's going to be enough to drive anybody up a wall. The fans were livid, right? So that Oli Marmol was frustrated after the game. I think, to me, and again, people are going to go, oh, fire Oli, this and that. I feel like a lot of what happened post-game was out of character for him, and it's the environment of that post-game, tensions high, cameras on. You're feeling like people are coming at you every which way, but that's the job, to be able to kind of weather those in an uncomfortable post-game is a job, but that's just, I think it's indicative of the tensions being high. So that's what happened after the game, and during the game, I think we've now kind of talked through just about everything. We didn't say much about Gibby. He gave you a quality start again, 7 Ks, but was dodging traffic all day, and there were moments, obviously, that, bad defensive plays contributed to the dynamic of making that a difficult day for him. But he went 6, he gave up 3 runs. They all were earned. He gave up 1 homer. Tovar's first, and then the second from Tovar came against Kittredge. And then Chris Roycroft came in and threw 2 scoreless to finish it off, kept the Cardinals in it. If the offense had done something late, Roycroft would have been the hero. But yeah, man, all in all, this is a game the Cardinals should not have lost, but they performed so poorly offensively that, this was about as bad of an offensive performance as I think they've had all year, considering, again, God bless Ryan Feltner, but his numbers, he's gettable, and he just didn't, the Cardinals didn't get anything against him. And again, I revert back, that had to be the question of what did Feltner do that made it so tough, and that's why Oli at the very beginning, the first clip I played, was describing the 4-seamer was doing this and the different pitches, but he basically said, without being mean to the guy, he said, we should have taken some better at-bats against him. And they should have. They should have won this game. Now you don't know who the starter is for Sunday. Palenta is going to pitch as many innings as a starter normally would. I just don't know if he's going to go first. If he's going first, it's bonkers that the Cardinals Oli didn't just say, yeah, it's him. Because like I said, I did pregame this morning. I drove all the way to the stadium just for pregame, and the question was asked, who's your starter? I don't have one yet, but I will after the game. But then he didn't. So I don't know. I do not know. I am at a loss. It's funny to say you're at a loss for words and then talk for 44 minutes. Although, I had some audio that helped us get through it. But let me know in the comments below what your thoughts were about this one and the Cardinals in general right now. I know it's not going to be very positive, and I understand. I get it. Because after all this, there's a couple more things I want to say before getting out of here. Let's take a look at the standings. The Cardinals are back to last place. They're in 5th in the NL Central. percentage points behind the Cubs, half game behind the Pirates, game behind the Reds, who I have said, hard charging. They've won 7 in a row. I think they'd be my pick to win the division as of the moment because it's almost a meme at this point to discount the Brewers, even though they have the best record and they're continuing to play good baseball. They're 12 games above 500 and they've won 7 of their last 10. But it's just funny to me at this point. I don't know why. But the Reds, I mean, they are dangerous if they can get healthy and stay kind of vibing the way that they are. They've won 7 in a row. But yeah, the Cardinals are in last. So that's a thing. And one more thing I want to touch on while I'm kind of lighting people up, which is not ever really my intention, but maybe people like it. Maybe people like that I'm talking about some of this stuff. I just felt it had to be discussed today. You know, if the function of this is a daily podcast talking about the Cardinals, this is what people were talking about today. So I talked about it. I tried to be fair with it. Hopefully I did a decent enough job. But I want to read a Jeff Jones tweet because today was Blogger Day at Busch Stadium, where the bloggers in the Cardinals blogger community, maybe some of y'all are listening now. If you are, shout out, what's up? Get a chance to, I believe they put him up in a suite, enjoy the game, but they get like a Q&A, which on Mozeliak, I think, before the game begins, to be able to ask their questions, because typically, unless you're affiliated with an affiliated media outlet, whether it's a TV station or radio station or what have you, you're not afforded, media credentials. But the bloggers do a lot of really good stuff and a lot of smart stuff in the stuff that's written. And so they get the chance to have that blogger day. And it's a credit to the Cardinals that they do that. I think it's a good thing. But the interesting part was this Q&A happened, and I saw some of the tweets from some of the folks out there on Twitter of things that Mo had said in that. And I probably missed some of them today because, like I said, I wasn't super duper locked in on what was going on at the time. But I would like to go back and kind of check some of that out and see what I missed. But Jeff's tweet says, wasn't aware until the game started that it was Blogger Day at Busch, but I'm glad Mozeliak was in attendance. First time he's spoken to a collective group of people who write about the team since opening day. And I texted Jeff and I said, really? Yeah, John Mozeliak has evidently not done a group media scrum talking to assembled reporters, whatever, like he typically has done in the past. What that normally looks like pre-2023, and I'm throwing COVID year out of this, but even then he did a lot of Zooms, so we always had an opportunity as a public group of writers or media to ask him questions, rather than the way we've seen John Mozeliak's communications with the public recently, which has been probably, text message behind the scenes. Somebody writes a story using the quotes. Martin Kilcoyne, I know, sat down with him on the TV side. Like it's sort of those structured, I think Frank Cusimano did a few weeks ago, more of those structured things, not ever to this point since opening day, which was now 3 months ago. What are we? End of March. So April, May. So 2.5 months ago, almost, that Mo has not held one of these. The reason I didn't even realize that was the case was because and again, I'm transparent. I'm not ever going to try to pretend to be doing something I'm not a part of, but I'm not covering a lot of these pre-games and ever during weekdays, unless it's like a day game that I'm able to get to and it's going to end before my show starts. But I have a radio show that I do on KTGR, which is in mid-Missouri in Columbia. I do it from home in O'Fallon, but I am on the air in Columbia every day, weekdays from 4 to 6. And that time frame precludes me from being able to, even on the games that I cover, I leave at 6 o'clock from my house when the show ends and I drive to Busch and I get there in the second inning because I live way the hell too far away from downtown. That's just the nature of nobody cares, but that's like my story. That's what I do. And I'm grinding at this, trying to, do my level best to cover the team. But I just didn't know. I just would have assumed when I see updates from reporters the first game of a homestand, as we often do, I just figure, all right, they're probably coming from Mo. And maybe they are, but it's texted to people, or maybe it's Oli, and I'm just not in those Oli, pre-game media availabilities. And so Oli has the updates for everybody on injuries, right? That's typically what's coming. And so it's probably just all from Oli. And I just kind of assumed, well, yeah, Mo, first day of a homestand. Before the Cardinals started losing in 2023, that's how it was. And again, COVID notwithstanding, it maybe wasn't every homestand, but pretty consistently, the first day of a homestand, the manager would talk, whether it was Matheny or Mike Schilt or Oli, And then Mo would talk. We'd get a text, hey, 3:15, Oli, 3:35 in the dugout, Mo. And it would be 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever, and a chance to kind of ask questions, right? It's a very simple matter. But evidently that's still not been something that John Mozeliak has done. And I have criticized for the very just phony way the Cardinals at the end of last season had their PR send out a message to all the media and said, hey, we're going to postpone this presser because the end of season press conference because we don't have any news to share yet. We'll probably do it. We're going to do it later on in October, maybe even after the World Series. Okay, cool. It was never mentioned again, ever, because it never happened. So it's just kind of like swept under the rug. The moment that there would have been a public-facing opportunity, you would have seen John Mozeliak on television, you would have seen him in print, you would have heard him in audio on radio talking about the season as the failure that it was. They'd never have to do it. Just didn't do it. And, the world kept spinning. So I guess the move worked because anytime you go 71-91 and you had playoff expectations, I understand trying to kind of lessen the blow of the criticism that's going to be out there by just not doing it. And they got away with it. I mean, there's no rule, I guess, that says they had to do it, but it had happened every previous year, right? Maybe not COVID year. Again, that's always a weird. If nothing else, it happened on Zoom. I'm sure it happened on Zoom, and I was probably in the room. But that's just one of those things that it's a trend now of this happened toward the end of last year, too. I mean, after the All-Star break, I don't think we got Mo, but maybe once the rest of the year, if that, in terms of like a pregame. And I could be wrong because, again, I was doing radio. So it's not that I would have even been there for a lot of those anyway. But it's a trend that has now continued into this year. And so, bloggers, you got the scoop today that has not been afforded the media availabilities at Busch so far this year outside of opening day. So that's something, I don't know. I just wanted to get that out there because I found it out today. I didn't know that Mo wasn't doing his normal, updates because of my other job that I have. So there it is. All right, I've ranted for 51 minutes, 52 minutes now, and I am done. I'm spent. I'm out of here. Appreciate you guys, as always, for listening. Let me have it in the comments. I'm a big boy. I will promise not to yell at you if you yell at me in the comments today. I get it that people are going to be fired up, and I understand it. You're not really wrong to be. This was a bad loss. They have to win on Sunday, but we don't even know who's pitching, so I don't know. That's all I got. All right, we'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.